Hello and welcome. I'm Sue Britz.
And I'm Tina Lokkbakk. Welcome to Retired.
This is the podcast where we talk about what life is like when we put on new tread, new wheels that move us to our next adventure. And guess what, Tina? We have our first guest.
Oh my God!
We have our
made
first
it.
guest. This is my friend Kate Bowen. She and I used to work together at elementary school. And
That's when
she
you deserted me, right?
yeah, I left
At our school.
I left Spanish immersion and went over to
Yeah.
the English track. Yeah.
Mainstream. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We'll have
And
to talk about that a later time.
okay. And Kate, here's the thing. Kate loves social studies. So
Oh, so she's like us.
yes, everything centers
Oh.
around that, writing, everything.
Oh.
So,
Oh.
Tina, this is Kate. Kate, this is Tina.
Well, very nice to meet you, Kate. And what a nice feeling to know that you love history like we do. That's
Oh,
fantastic.
absolutely. In fact, in our classroom, history was the core, and we wove everything else into our teaching. All those
Correct.
darn standards and things that you have to do, you know?
And now,
Well,
but I guess you're retired.
I
Shouldn't that take us
am.
into our headlight question? Hey, Kate, what was your road to retirement?
Actually, it was a little different than I had planned. Going back to 2018, I retired at 58. I really thought that I would make it at least to 60, just for, that money purposes thing. But I had two pretty difficult classes back to back, and I was bringing home a lot of um, the emotional weight of my students who were very, very needy. Um, we had at the time when during our last year, we had a situation where we had all of our IEPs and 504s and all of those reviews were all on Wednesdays. And so we had a roving sub on Wednesdays, and our roving sub and I soon realized that she never left our room. We just had back to back to back IEPs, and it was a lot. And when you're making those modifications and accommodating the different learnings of all of those students, it takes a lot out of you because you also have a lot of other kids who need you as well. And so it was kind of funny because it was actually my husband who noticed a real, I don't want to say deterioration of my
Mm-hmm.
generally sunshiny demeanor, but he just really, really noticed that it was affecting me. And in our family, at least as the sole woman, I very rarely put myself first. I was a mom, a wife, a teacher, and then Kate was way down on that list somewhere. And it was a real moment. So we made our appointments with STIRS and we looked at what, teaching for 3 more years would do. And because I had been a tandem teacher for a number of years, I was full time and then went to a tandem teacher when our son was born because, of course, putting him first. Um, because I was a tandem, if I had stayed till I was 60, those next 2 years, my paycheck would have only been an additional $37.62 a month. And so that wasn't worth my mental and emotional state. So that's how we kind of got there. And um, I was really fortunate to work with a wonderful tandem teacher and friend, Sarji. And when you're a tandem, it's kind of like a marriage. You're partners in everything. You can finish each other's sentences. And in the classroom, it should be really seamless between who is teaching. And she was ready for a change. And so when I told her, it wasn't bad news necessarily because she was ready to look into something different. I think Sue actually was more shocked than anyone else. And as I recall, Sue, I think um, I told you on our fateful trip to Muir Woods that year that we never got to Muir Woods. So, yeah, but we kept it real quiet, and I announced it to Sue and Sarjeet first, of course, as my dearest colleagues, and then my principal and the rest of the staff on that famous teacher workday when school was over.
No, I want to burst out into tears because, Kate, I am not teaching for those very same reasons because there were such extreme behaviors. And I just thought, is this what this has become? Is this now my profession where adults are having to chase children instead of just being able to teach? And that was the beginning of like, do I want to continue? Because it hurt my soul and because you do care about every kid.
Oh my goodness, yes. And I think I love teaching, don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, but um, with all of these other
Pools.
responsibilities and pulls, it was taking
Mhm.
away from me doing the very best job that I could.
Correct.
And so, it was not about the kiddos. This was not their doing.
No.
It was all of the other factors. And, I don't know the answer to that. Um, we're obligated, obviously, to keep those IEPs and everything up to speed, but it is really, really difficult. And we had four adult paras our last year in the
In
classroom.
one classroom?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that doesn't count the full inclusion kiddos who were the in and out. They would come with us separate, but I had four full time in my class.
In your classroom
Hmm.
every day.
Hmm. And that really changes the dynamics too. We were really fortunate.
Wow.
We had outstanding paras, but I was also working with them to learn how to modify and things. I mean, they were wonderful people, but with exception of one, they really hadn't had any experience in how to modify those different assignments so that those kids would feel included in our, class.
One other question before we move to our topic is, Kate, what are you doing now? What is your new tread?
Yeah. Well,
Where's your life going now?
when I went to part time and I had just transitioned to sixth grade, which was
Oh.
not where I saw myself at all. I was fourth and fifth grade or a combination for a number of years when I started my teaching, and we had a really unusual situation in that I had a student that I had for fourth grade and for fifth grade, and I had to go to sixth grade because she had an IEP that said specifically she could not have a male teacher. And at the time, we only had male teachers in the sixth grade. And so my principal said, I would like you to do this. I kind of went kicking and screaming because, those sixth graders, they're big and they've got attitudes and all kinds of things. I ended up loving it.
Ah,
And one
good.
of the reasons why I loved it, although I must say I like fifth better, but I digress. One of the reasons why I loved it was the ancient civilizations curriculum. But it
Yes.
but I'm so old that it was super new then when we went from
Wow.
um weird stuff like to those ancient civilizations. So I took some courses through the history project at UC Davis, and that really helped me to set up my curriculum. And from there, I just was kind of like a history project groupie, I guess you could say, and I took a lot of stuff. And when I was on leave after having Spencer, they asked me to facilitate some other courses, which worked out super nicely when I was home. And then I could, see some grown-ups at night, and it was
Correct.
great. So through that, so that was like 1993, 94. I always was connected with the History Project, which was we're one of 9 different subject matter projects that are across the state. And now I work for the statewide office. So the fancy name is California History Social Science Project. And I currently am an independent contractor, and I write curriculum for elementary students. I do workshops. with elementary students, both online, of course, because of the pandemic, but now starting to be in person. And I do anything that's kind of in the elementary lane. And so I've really pushed hard to show that elementary is this wonderful integration of all of the subject matters. And so we've done like our first collaborations with the reading project and the writing project and the math project, and just getting all of those things together under, like, say, one theme that unites us, to let people see a little piece into our world. And so I'm committed to making sure that history happens at the elementary level.
I love that. Uh, making sure history happens.
Wow.
And that brings us to our topic of the day, which is International Women's Day. Hey,
Woohoo!
we're going back in history. We're going back to 1910.
1910.
1910 is
Holy moly.
that's when it
Really?
officially launched in 1910. Now, was International Women's Day a surprise to you, Kate, when you heard about it?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
familiar with like Women's History Month, but I didn't really know that there was an international day dedicated
Okay.
to women.
This is creepy and scary and weird. We are three women, not only highly educated, overeducated, and we're teachers, and we love
We're
social studies and
teachers.
history, and we grew up in the 60s, and we don't know about International Women's Day. How can that be?
In fact, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I will. I thought it was kind of a recent thing.
Me too.
Like
Yeah. No, because I know
Okay.
that there's
Thanks,
been
Kate.
there in Yolo County, I think there's a luncheon for
Yes.
women, and I think they always try and have it around the actual day. I'm not sure about that, but I thought that's maybe my knowledge right there as to what's going
And
on here.
Kate, I remember seeing ads like for Sacramento where famous businesswomen would go, and that's how I found out that there even was
There
a
you
day.
go.
Listen to this one. Mine came up with when I went to Ukraine as part of the Sister City program. That was back in around 2000-ish or something. And I went to our sister city in Uman, Ukraine, and it happened to overlap into International Women's Day, and I had never heard of it, and I thought, oh, this is like something from the Soviet Union, where in theory, all the men and women are treated the same in the business world there, and of course we know that's not how it is, but that it came out of that. It didn't, folks. It came out of U.S. history, women's suffrage movement, and everything. I had no idea.
Was it being celebrated in Ukraine?
It was being celebrated in Ukraine. It's one of the first ones.
Wow.
These are some of the countries that celebrated International Women's Day after it was established in 1910. It was countries like
Wow.
Ukraine, Afghanistan, Russia, Uganda, Uzbekistan, Cuba, Georgia, Moldova, all these countries, Vietnam, all these countries
I
we're
just got
celebrating
goosebumps.
International Women's Day, and we were little girls growing up and never did. So in Uman, they were giving
Wow.
the men would be extra careful about opening doors and saying Happy International Women's Day and giving them flowers, and so forth. And it almost felt a little patronizing
Mhm.
because all you get. The joke there was all you get is that one day. Shut up, woman. You've got one day. That's your day. That was
Well, hey,
You
it's
that
better
was the
better
joke.
than 365
Well, there
not.
we go. At least there's an acknowledgement that even existed. Whereas in our country we didn't have Women's Month, then we didn't do that until more recent years. It's crazy.
It's so interesting because you'd think that the United States considers itself very progressive, and therefore, we'd be
Right.
a little bit more on the cutting edge. I'd take a door opening every once in a while. That would be great.
Yeah. No
know?
kidding. So the history came out of a lot of other things. I mean, the women's suffrage movement, the around the turn of the century, people were working in factories, mostly, this menial labor. It was children, it was women, and women had finally, I mean, they're, of course, they have to go home and take care of all the obligations there as well, and they had had enough, and also they wanted suffrage. They wanted to be a full citizen in their own country, with better
What a
pay and better
concept.
rights and being able to vote and so forth.
It's amazing. I just, I'm still kind of over here just absorbing all of this information because women have been such an important part of our country's history. Um,
Correct.
about that, but I know that it's something that um, has recently been something that I've been working really hard on to make sure that we have voices of women and children and people of color as we teach our history. And it's super important that we do have all of those voices.
I just want to, before we turn it over to some more of your knowledge, your very specialized and wonderful knowledge, Kate, I just kind of want to make that connection back to the fact that three of us grew up during this time. And when I remember Equal Rights Amendment was a thing, I heard about it offhand. I didn't hear it full on because, I mean, it was on whatever I caught on the news, what we were allowed to watch, that was about it. Because in my family, they didn't talk about those things. At school, they didn't talk about it. Um, it was women's rights movement, and Title IX came out, and I had no idea what Title IX was. That it and we were the generation that it could deeply affect in putting you into universities and activities, and I didn't know anything about it, and even being a well-educated person.
For the listeners here, can you explain in a quick little way what is Title IX?
Well, Title IX gave women in sports equal opportunities. And so when there was a men's sport, you needed to have an equal sport for women to play, um, with the exception of football, I think. So if there was men's basketball, there was also women's basketball. If there was men's soccer, there was women's soccer. And if there wasn't, at least at the high school level, I think you needed to allow women to try out for that sport and have a spot. Correct me if I'm wrong with
Yeah,
this.
it deeply affected sports because it created programs for young girls and women, and but it wasn't even that. Title IX was supposed to prohibit sex-based discrimination in schools and other educational programs. Period. And so it's not just sports.
Oh, so much
Yes.
more broader
Hmm.
than just
And
sports.
yet we weren't informed about it.
But there's a picture book for that.
Oh, well, that's good.
Anyway, I've got it.
And so these are so you have these picture books. They are a representation to inform children now today about the realities of their rights here and now, but also the history where it came from and how it should really be institutionalized in a positive way.
I just have to take a moment. And I'm thinking about everybody our age forward. At least I remember there was always boys and girls teams. And I'm just now sitting here thinking, I can't believe that we even had to have a Title IX. Like, I'm kind of blown away that there was a time where girls didn't play basketball. Like, even for me, I'm 55 and even this is shocking. Because I
That's what
only
we were
knew
talking
that,
about earlier. Yeah, I
right?
mean, the fact that women couldn't wear pants, it was seen as scandalous. It was actually against the law in certain times in our history. I
That's
mean,
right.
all these things that we take for granted now, we've come a long way, baby, but we haven't come far enough for sure.
But it
No, there's still work to be done, but I just think it's so amazing to me that it didn't always exist.
And
Okay.
certainly in our town, one of the books that I've read with kids, and just one of the things that has been so eye opening to them, is that we're a town of bicycles. And there's a wonderful book called Born to Ride, which was takes place at the turn of the century. And it's about a little girl and a little boy, and the little boy is allowed to ride his bicycle, but she wasn't allowed to ride because they thought that women and girls on bicycles, you would go so fast that you would develop what they called bicycle face, which was your cheeks are, you're going so fast that your cheeks are going to be blown back towards your ears, and therefore you would be unattractive, and then no man would ever look at you. And it's so very interesting because um, bicycles were so liberating for women because it was one of the first times that women
Of
didn't have to
course.
have a male chaperone or dad to hitch up the wagon and, do all of those things. And it's so liberating in that it affected fashion, it affected independence, what women could do, where they could go. And when I read this book with students, especially here, they're shocked to hear that they, as 10 and 11-year-olds or any year old would not have been able to ride a bike because it wasn't allowed. And what's fun about that particular book is that mom is kind of in the background and she's like leading suffragette meetings and painting signs and stuff. And that kind of by osmosis, the little girl figures out, oh, this is part of a bigger issue that we've got going on here with that voting thing. And, I want to get on my bike.
And those issues still go on today. I mean, and,
Kidding.
and that's the thing is like our kids look at us with shock and they don't really believe us. And then they understand that it is part of history and that's the power in it. But then they start, hopefully, and all of us start looking around going, hold it. Why is that the way it is? Why are these injustices? And that's what International Women's Day is about. The United Nations has a great website that you can visit, and I suggest you do it. It's the topic this year is invest in women, accelerate progress. And you can't do that unless you look at the world around you and figure out how to accelerate progress. Internationally,
Internationally.
yeah.
Well, and the thing is that I think that one way that we look at progress is we look at all these little teachable moments that none of us ever knew before and how we can credit those movements or those opportunities to women who were often in the background but were doing great things. And sometimes you need to bring that to the forefront because a lot of the things are just taken for granted.
Absolutely. I mean, just looking at equal pay for women, that's another topic that we forget to keep looking at, and that's one of them. Business opportunities, education, violence against women and children. Those are still, they were at the forefront during the women's suffrage movement, and they are still today.
I just want to pipe in a little experience that came into my mind when I was in high school. And my parents were a little older when they had me. So they were that much more less liberal. And they came from Norway. So they brought, their traditions and things. And I remember my dad was the president of the Optimist Club. And the Elks Rotary at that time were only open for men, and women had started to come in and onto the scene. And it brought up much discussion in my house that was very anti-women breaking in because men should have their special place. And it wasn't until I became an adult and realized what that meant. It meant lack of business opportunities and connections for women in business. And so that really put women behind, not to be able to be into these groups. And it wasn't about men getting to be with men. It was men making all the connections, which could keep women business out of prosperity, really. So it's funny how you see it as a kid, you hear it in one way, and then you go out into the world and then you realize how these things do
Now
affect women.
you're doing your own business and having to make those connections.
That's
Yeah.
true. And part of the Chamber of Commerce where there are women and men. And of course, and again, I'm walking into this world where, thank God, people paved the way before me.
Exactly. Right.
Women get things done.
I'm sorry, say that again, Kate.
Women get things done.
That is so true.
Wasn't it just in the last couple weeks that city council, I want to say in Minnesota, is all women for the first time? And I thought, wow, it's
Wow.
2024 and it just happened and we're celebrating. But
Oh,
still, I mean,
right.
yay. Yay us.
That's so true. And we find it
I
odd and we're
know.
laughing,
Like,
right? We never laughed at
no,
all
I
men.
celebrated, and then I say, wait, stop. Let's think about that for a minute.
Yeah, because it's not seen as anything odd just to have a whole panel of men be in charge of
No.
anything.
Right.
Anything. Exactly.
All right, that brings us to some final thoughts about International Women's Day. Kate?
Well, when you asked me to come and talk about International Women's Day, I started to think about all the opportunities for students to know about women that they maybe have never heard of. And I found that using picture books to bring up those topics with students is really helpful, and it helps teachers too. But one of the things that I found really interesting was a book I have called Fighting for Yes, which is about a disability activist named Heuman, who was part of the 504 protests in San Francisco and at UC Berkeley, and really made excellent progress for all folks who with disabilities. And I think it's important for our students to see that while we have a full inclusion model, that wasn't always the case, and that to appreciate that there's a history behind having students of all abilities in our classrooms, and how it's something that we deal with every day with kids with IEPs or 504s. All different types of abilities are welcome in our classroom. And you can trace that back in a lot of situations to women and their efforts on the behalf of either themselves or their children.
Absolutely, Kate. I mean, that's what something a strong movement like a women's movement has done is create parallel movements that and include and empower other people, and that's what it's all about. Tina, your final thoughts?
So I do have a final thought, and it just made me come to understand, as we didn't know about International Women's Day, not much, if anything, about Title IX. And I realize it's because it's our teaching of history has been his story. And we haven't been able to incorporate women yet into the schools so that we all know what Title IX is. That's not been a focus. So I hope that will continue to change. And we have to remember, evolution takes time. So at least we're on the trajectory, so we hope, continuing forward. And with time, we will have these things in a storybook.
Her story, right?
Instead of history. Her story. I was trying to be gender neutral here.
And that's the
just
whole
say
point. You know, as
storybook.
feminists, it doesn't mean you're just a female. It's about humanity understanding that women have equal rights. That wraps up this episode of Retired. First, I'd like to thank our first guest, Kate Bowen, for joining us. Thanks so much, Kate.
Thank you, Kate, and our fellow historian teachers. So neat that you're pro 6th grade.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
All right, and next time we'll continue our adventure in retirement, talking about women of a certain age.
Until then, please feel free to lend your feedback or ask questions by emailing us at retiredpodcastnewtread@gmail.com. You're invited to follow us on Facebook at Retired Podcast New Tread. Check the show notes for links and contact information.
Retired is co-hosted by Sue Britz and Tina Lokkbakk. It's produced, directed, and edited by me, Sue Britz. Music and graphics are by me too. Please click to subscribe so you won't miss your chance to join our retired road trip.